Good evening and welcome to The Breakdown, brought to you by the Lincoln Project. I am Tara Setmayer. This is the Rick Wilson, and happy Thursday. Well, it has been a week, and we're coming on the tail end of the first full week of the Biden administration, and so tonight we're going to talk a little Congress, little 100 days of Biden. What are we going to expect from him? How's Congress going to function? Because as we've seen, it's been quite dysfunctional already. And we have two great guests for you. Tonight we have Susan Page of USA Today to talk to us about Biden and Congress and what to expect from his interactions with them. Can he work with them? Are we going to get anything done? We'll see. We'll see what she says. And we also have later on Norm Ornstein from the American Enterprise Institute to talk a little impeachment, a little filibuster, and why in God's name is the GOP sticking with Donald Trump. So make sure you stay tuned for both of our fantastic guests tonight and that conversation. And of course, we always want to hear from you. Hashtag Ask the Breakdown. Send in your questions on Twitter and we will answer some of them. And as always, we have our Zoom room where you can call in and we could possibly take your calls live. I believe there it is, the Zoom room meeting ID. Rick Wilson, you know, I really wish that we did not have to talk about this freaking lunatic, but we have to. Marjorie Taylor Greene, she is a QAnon kook who is now a member of Congress. And thanks to the intrepid work of my buddies over there at the K-File at CNN, they have uncovered some old videos of her chasing around the Parkland kid and harassing him. Really horrific comments that she's made about Nancy Pelosi, accusing her of treason and saying that, treason, we know what the punishment for treason is. It's death, threatening federal agents. She's called the Sandy Hook shooting false flag operations. She's a 9/11 truther. And this woman is not only a member of Congress, but she has now been given a committee assignment. Kevin McCarthy has actually put her on a committee. This is so outrageous. I don't even know where to start. They kicked Steve King off of his committees for making some racist comments. This woman has said outrageous things. I mean, dangerously outrageous things on video before she was a member of Congress, but still, she has said some crazy things as a member of Congress. She's been part of the Stop the Steal. She doesn't believe the election was legitimate. I mean, she's a certifiable lunatic. And she now has a committee assignment on the Education and Labor Committee, of all places.
Look, I hate Marjorie Taylor Greene as much as the next, cognizant human being. She is a clown. She is a conspiracy lunatic. She is a cruel and shitty human being. She is the lowest tier of life in our political space today because you add everything up about her, and she represents something really, really dark about where this country's going. But you got to put the blame here on Kevin McCarthy. You got to lay it flat on Kevin McCarthy's doorstep. Because if he went out and said, "Hey, I want somebody who's crazier than Jim Jordan, more conspiratorial than the worst nightmares that we could possibly come up with," well, you'd go and pick out Marjorie Taylor Greene. You wouldn't try, to boost someone like this unless you were fully morally collapsed and comfortable with all the things they believe in. If you want to believe those things, you want to accept those things that they believe in, well, you know what? You shouldn't be in Congress. And if you're the speaker wannabe, as Kevin McCarthy, now minority leader, is, you don't want those people besmirching your brand nationally. It's going to be hard to grow the party when you've got Jim Jordan with a red carpet out for lunatics like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, and the rest. And look, those two are very flashy. There are a ton more of them that we're not talking about yet that I'm sure they're going to embarrass us themselves very soon. But this is a person that is there because of or because of Kevin McCarthy. He has decided that that's fine. He's
It,
decided she's the mainstream now. That's what the Republican Party is now. And the rest of you in the conference who think, oh, that's not us. She's a little bit kooky, but that's no, that is you. That's you now. That's all of you.
that's 100% right. I don't want to hear these apologists who are trying to say that, oh, well, that's not who the Republican Party is, and she's going to get a stern talking to. Kevin McCarthy has a meeting with her next week. And what? What do you mean a stern talking to? She just pledged $175,000 on their fundraising call yesterday. He's going to take her money. Because that's for people who don't know. When you're a member of Congress, you become part of these. You have certain fundraising goals that the party establishment and leadership packs and all these things ask you to fulfill to help with the midterm elections. And so she pledged $175,000, and McCarthy was like, "Wonderful." No, not wonderful. You are a lunatic who believes that 9/11 was an inside job, that that Sandy Hook had child actors, that the Parkland shooting was paid for by George Soros and wasn't real, and harassed David Hogg when he was on Capitol Hill a couple years ago, after he survived that trauma. You don't take that person's money if you don't believe that that person is a part of what your party represents now. You don't give that person a freaking committee assignment on the education committee of all places. What a smack in the face to the families of all of those poor children that were killed in Sandy Hook and Parkland. What the hell is wrong with Kevin McCarthy? And then he flies down to Mar-a-Lago to kiss Donald Trump's fat ass.
You know what? Kevin McCarthy today was in a way admitting that what we've been doing at the Lincoln Project has been successful, Tara. He was down there to beg Donald Trump to endorse a new thing called the Trump Congress or whatever it is. He wants Donald Trump's help using Donald Trump's email list going forward because Kevin McCarthy has been cut off and a lot of his members have been cut off from raising money in corporate America. And folks, listen,
Right?
small donations fund the majority of campaigns now. However, the campaign committees need the big dollars. They need the money from places like Home Depot and IBM and Ford and Nike and everywhere else. And right now, a lot of that money is saying, we're listening to the Lincoln Project's message, which is you can't be good for your brand and be in favor of a caucus that wanted to disenfranchise tens of millions of African Americans. You can't be in favor of a caucus that welcomed a mob to the Capitol. You can't be in favor of a caucus that believes the election should be overturned to keep Donald Trump in power like some kind of crappy authoritarian. So their money is running away. Now, that's why Kevin McCarthy is down there giving Donald Trump a lap dance and begging for money. And you don't want to see him in the champagne room, I'm telling you. But this guy has clearly lost his ability to raise money outside of the Trump sphere.
That's right. You are 100% right about that. This is all this is about. This is the most cynical, craven political act by a desperate minority leader in Congress with his political ambitions ahead of his oath of office, and has decided to completely sell whatever soul he had left to Trumpism. This is not, we are here at the Lincoln Project, are not going to let these people rest for what they have unleashed here. They will not rest because they need to be held accountable for what they're doing. This country we have a major party that has now fallen victim to kooks, conspiracy theorists, and lunatics, and it cannot stand. This is not the future of our country. And so, best believe Abe is watching every one of them, and we will not let them rest. We can't, because this is what happens when you have the InfoWars groups elevated, and when you have a right wing media ecosystem that goes unchallenged, putting out bullshit and propaganda and lies and indoctrinates people for years on end with no consequence. None. And here's the easiest thing that the McCarthy and the quote, mainstream establishment Republicans, because there are things that they could have done up until this point to check Donald Trump and they didn't. Now they've got their hands full with these kook QAnon dangerous lunatics, and they're still not doing what they could do to put a stop to it. So they will reap what they sow, every single seed. Um, do you want to say something before I go on to the next thing?
It's going to get ugly.
It is, and it should be, because I think that the American people have got to be made aware of what these guys are doing. We cannot normalize this insanity because that's what they've tried to do. So many people. I'll tell you somebody else. Mia Love. Remember her? She was a black Republican member of Congress out in Utah. She had so much promise. She came in the same class as Will Hurd, who was another rising star in the Republican Party. Will Hurd decided to retire instead of continuing on. He didn't run again this time around. And he's been speaking out now a bit more forcefully. But Mia Love lost her last race. And CNN hired her as a commentator. And I was watching her earlier tonight where she was asked straight up about if she were still in Congress, would she have voted to impeach Donald Trump? You know what she said? No. No, because, we just need to move on. We just need to move on from him. And we just can't continue to obsess and give him all the oxygen and move on. I have never seen a bunch of cowards like these people in my life. Could you imagine if this group of Republicans were around during like the Civil War? They'd be on the wrong side. No
Right. These guys would have been,
courage.
they'd be based out of Richmond. Okay.
That's
This would
right.
not be, this would not be the configuration of that they think they have. Tara, one of the things that's really important to think about here, and a lot of Republican senators are whispering to each other, if we convict him, it'll just make him mad. It'll just make him stay involved. He'll keep bugging us. We convict him. He'll get people to primary us. They're telling themselves that. They are fools. They have it exactly backward.
Yep.
If they don't convict him, that is giving him permission to continue to play fuck around with them for eternity. That is giving them permission to come back again and again and again.
Yep.
Look, there's an old phrase that my grandmother used to use: you can keep throwing that alligator fried chicken, but when you run out, it's going to eat you. Okay? It's
Yeah.
going to eat them. He's going to come for them. They can throw him little treats here and there. They can pretend they still, but if they don't convict him and take away the threat of his returning to power, he will keep trying to return to power. I don't know why this is
True.
hard. This is like the
I
most
don't
one o.
either.
Don't you? I mean, I'm Tara. Doesn't it shock you? It's like a lot of the Republicans that we worked with a generation before this would have seen this coming a mile off. And these
Absolutely.
guys it's like, and look, we all know Kevin McCarthy's dumb as a sack of hair, but a lot of these people do not look as dumb as they're acting, and they can't get it out through their heads what's going on here.
It's just amazing to me, this whole thing that they have no courage. I grew up in the 90s where you had the tough as nails Republicans, the Tom DeLays, the Dick Armies, even Newt Gingrich, however you feel about him now, but they were tough and they got shit done. They never would have put up with this kind of shit. And here you have these mamsy-pamsy Republicans that are scared of Donald Trump and his ilk. Sometimes you have to punch the bully back in the face and tell him, stop it, stop it, because he wouldn't know what to do. He's used to failing up his entire life. And that's why he continues to do what he does. When he gets slapped down, he doesn't know what to do with himself. And not one of them has done it. And Liz Cheney might have been able to stand up and a couple of other Republicans, but that's not enough. There's not enough of them that could have stopped Donald Trump and told him no. All they need to do was talk to Mary Trump to get advice on how to tell Donald Trump to cut the shit, but they haven't. And moving on, just one last thing on this. Hillary Clinton was scarred with Benghazi for years, and there were valid issues there. But she testified 3 years after that event occurred. The Republicans didn't say just move on. Okay, people died there. Yes, and people died on January 6th. They didn't say just move on after Benghazi. Well, it's over with now and we know what happened. And they forced Hillary Clinton to testify for 11 hours and berated the Obama administration for 3 years. And you can still hear if people go on about Benghazi 7 years later, 8 years later. And they want us to move on from a fucking insurrection that killed people, including police officers at the Capitol. It's despicable.
That those guys who died in Benghazi, the ambassador and security folks that died in Benghazi, those were tragedies. Those were tragic
Yep.
deaths. There were policy failures around that. They should have been
Yes.
investigated, and they were. But as we know, The Republican Party then treated that as this white whale going after Hillary Clinton and the State Department and the Obama
For
administration, and
years.
that there were legitimate concerns. I reflected many of the legitimate concerns at the time. But after a point, it became a performative show. And not one time did I ever hear any of those Republicans say, we should just move on. It's time to just put this behind us. This is in the past. Only a few people died, so it's okay. Not one, ever. So, you know,
Exactly. And
it's
that
astounding.
it is astounding. And they will meet their demise and end up in the ash heap of history as a bunch of profiles and cowardice, and deservedly so. And that brings me to our next issue. Speaking of what happened on the 6th, we have found out every day that goes by, we get more and more information about the failures that day and the fallout from January 6th, that insurrection attack. And the head of the Capitol Police Union put out a memo talking about how many police officers were actually injured that day and the nature of their injuries. There were over 140 officers who were defending the Capitol that day that sustained pretty significant injuries. Here are some of them. Some of them had broken ribs, they had head injuries, one has a smashed spinal disc, stab wounds from a metal fence stake, an officer lost an eye, and we just found out today that a Metropolitan police officer has committed suicide who was on duty that day at the Capitol. They don't know the facts surrounding it, but that would be the second law enforcement officer who was involved that day who was committed suicide. The other one was a Capitol police officer. This is an absolute tragedy. And this is what the Republicans want us to just move on from. This is what they're condoning when they don't convict Donald Trump for his impeachment the second time. This is their party. This is what they're doing. They own this. And I think every single person in the media who confronts them, they should ask them in every interview, is this what they condone? Are you okay with this? You're okay with this. And if you're not, then why aren't you convicting the son of a bitch that fomented it and sat back and let it happen as it was happening? And you have an opportunity to stop him from ever running again and exorcising him from the party, and yet you don't. Why not? Explain that to their families, to the families of the fallen officers, that you claim you're Blue Lives Matter and law enforcement, all pro law and order. Bullshit. No, you're not.
I never want to hear that shit from them again. Back to
Ever.
blue, law and order, Blue Lives Matter. Guess what? If you are not out there not only condemning, because a lot of members of the Republican members have had, put out the one-line press release, oh, we condemn the violence. But if you're not out pursuing the people up to and including Donald Trump and the 1 or 2 degrees of separation around him, the people that were organizing this and running this and promoting this and encouraging this, if you're not after those people too, don't ever open your filthy mouth again about Blue Lives Matter and about backing law enforcement, because you don't. They beat a cop to death with flagpoles and a fire extinguisher.
Exactly.
So you don't.
It's unbelievable, and they need to be held accountable for it. Do not let them get away with it. All right. Now that we're sufficiently done ranting, let's bring in tonight's first guest. There she is. Susan Page is the Washington Bureau Chief of USA Today. She has covered 10 presidential campaigns and 6 White House administrations, and she's interviewed the past 9 presidents. For her book, Madam Speaker, Nancy Pelosi and the Lessons of Power, it is coming out this April, and she also moderated the vice presidential debate, so she may look familiar to you because that was quite the debate. Welcome, Susan Page.
Hey, Tara, it's great to be with you.
That is a fabulous mint green sweater, by the way, too. I'm all about color. So I have to ask you first, before we get into anything serious, because we just ranted and it was all, it was too much. When you were moderating the vice presidential debate, did you see the fly land on Pence's head? And what did you think when you saw it?
So I can tell you that I am extremely grateful that I was unaware of the fly on Pence's head. And I can tell you that Pence was also unaware of it. And when the debate was over, he walked off stage. I followed him off stage. his kids then came up. They had been in the audience watching and told him about this fly, which just flummoxed both of us.
Oh,
It wasn't until I could see some of the footage that I realized that this fly, which seemed enormous, it was like a giant fly, and it landed on his head, and then it stayed there. It was like it had
oh,
been stuck there. And of course, you could really see it because his hair is so white. So it will definitely go down in history as the debate with the fly.
oh my gosh. I'm telling you, the memes that came out after that were only second to the Bernie Mittens memes that came out after the inauguration. It was too much. And I think when in our in memoriam, we had the fly in our in memoriam for saying goodbye to the Trump era. So anyway, I had to get that out of the way.
It could be the first line in my obit, right? Susan Page, who moderated the debate with the fly, died yesterday.
It's on the fly.
Oh my goodness. So let's talk about Biden's first 100 days. And if for those who are neophytes in politics and are just kind of starting to pay attention to how we politicos pay attention to, I call it Congress time. When I worked in Capitol Hill, my calendar was based off of congressional recesses and federal holidays. And when you have your new president come in, you always have the first 100 days. And that is a metric by which you measure how much they can get done in the first 100 days. Do you think that Biden will get some significant policy wins through Congress in these first 100 days, given the dynamic we've seen so far?
Well, it might depend on how you define major, but yes, I think there will be action in Congress in these first 100 days. He's got till the end of April to deliver on that. There is, I think, a consensus in Congress for some additional COVID relief. The problem is there's not a consensus for $1.9 trillion worth of it, which is what the administration wants. But given Joe Biden's history, I think it is likely that the White House will be willing to take a smaller bill or maybe break the bill in two. There are a lot of Democrats who are opposed to doing that. But yes, I think that the urgency of the moment, this terrible pandemic, which continues to kill so many Americans every single day, will force through something in Congress. That's not to say we're going to be in some golden age of bipartisanship. I think that's unlikely. But yes, I think that at the end of this 100 days, we'll have not only some of this executive orders we see him signing every day, but something else that gets signed into law.
Do you think that the COVID response is what's setting that tone? Because, COVID is ravaging our country, and it doesn't give a damn whether you're a Democrat or Republican or you live in a red or blue state. Everyone is suffering. And the vaccine rollout has been an absolute disaster. They've inherited a mess of epic proportions from the Trump administration. So do you think that that's what's setting the tone for the agenda? Because everybody has to work together to accomplish tackling this.
Yeah. In a way, it's surprising that it hasn't. The COVID pandemic is so catastrophic. It's the worst health crisis we've seen in this country in more than a century. It's taken a death toll now bigger than World War II in the space of a year. You'd think it would propel even more consensus, right? More willingness to spend some money to try to give relief to people who are hungry or getting evicted or get kids back to school, and certainly to get vaccines out into people's arms. It's doing that less than you might have expected, but I do think it is the number one, number two, and number three issue in this country, is getting the pandemic under control, and at that point being able to do something to revive this economy. We saw the worst annualized growth figures since the end of World War II coming out. Now the economy is maybe showing its resilience in some ways too, but man, we've got to get past this period. And the only way to go forward is to first get the disease under control.
Mm-hmm. Rick?
One of the things that Joe Biden is uniquely positioned as is he's a guy with 40 years of legislative experience in Washington. And I mean, in that particular aspect of governance. I mean, no one else has come close to that in terms of the knowledge of the relationships, of the process, of everything else. Do you think that's going to be an advantage for him going forward? Are you seeing any signs that that's already shaping the way that Biden is handling the job?
Yeah, huge advantage for him. The president in our history with the most experience on Capitol Hill himself, someone who's maintained a lot of relationships on Capitol Hill, comes from an era where there was more bipartisan cooperation than there is today. We haven't really had a president in modern times with that depth of experience on Capitol Hill. George H.W. Bush had served in the House, had a lot of experience in government appointments, but for someone with a depth of knowledge and experience and just comfort with the rhythms and the norms of Capitol Hill, it's a huge advantage for him. You've seen it in the way he's treated Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell is not a guy who did Barack Obama any favors when Obama was president. Joe Biden was very familiar with that. He was sometimes dispatched to try to deal with Mitch McConnell, given their long history. Biden has treated Mitch McConnell in a pretty deferential way so far, because he hopes there might be some way to get some Republican support for these actions. But the fact is, we heard from Nancy Pelosi today at her weekly news conference. She is prepared to go with this device called reconciliation, which means Democrats would not need any Republican votes to get a relief bill through. And it looks, I think, that her expectation is bipartisanship is not going to work. They're going to get a bill through, but they're going to do it through this tactic called reconciliation.
I'm glad you brought that up, actually. Can you explain to our viewers what budget reconciliation is? I lived through budget reconciliation for 7 years when I was on Capitol Hill. I never want to hear that term again. Unfortunately, it's rearing its ugly head once again. So can you just explain in layman's terms what that means?
I'll do my best, although Norm Ornstein, I'm sure, would do a better job. But under budget reconciliation, they passed a budget resolution, and then they can use this kind of secondary legislation that cannot be filibustered in the Senate to make adjustments that relate to the budget and to revenues. You can't do everything through reconciliation. Reconciliation was the process they had to use to pass the Affordable Care Act. Once Democrats lost that Massachusetts Senate seat, lost their 60-vote majority in the Senate. And they couldn't do some of the things they had hoped to do in the Affordable Care Act because they were using reconciliation. But you can do a lot. One of the big questions, I think, is Bernie Sanders, who's, of course, the new chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, insists they can do a $15 an hour minimum wage in reconciliation. Most people think the parliamentarian won't let that happen. But you can do a lot, and you can do it without any bipartisan help.
Yeah, I mean, I know we have a lot of Lincoln Project supporters who are Bernie fans, but oh my God, Bernie Sanders, chairman of the Budget Committee, is just, for those of us who are still conservative, it makes me clench a little. But we'll see. We'll see how he does. It's good. I can't wait for the Larry David impressions on Saturday Night Live as Bernie is chairing
Yes.
committees. Um, do you think, though, because you mentioned Mitch McConnell and his posture with Barack Obama? I mean, again, I was on Capitol Hill at the time, and I remember it was obstruct all the time. He didn't let anything get through. And it feels almost like he's dusting that playbook off again. I really don't see how it's to the advantage of the Republicans in the Senate to work with Joe Biden. As much as Biden is trying to be deferential to McConnell and they're trying to work together, I don't know. I mean, do you think that that we're just maybe he's being Pollyanna-ish about this, or are we going to see a whole hell of a lot of obstruction going on with the Republicans in Congress, because they seem to be very good at that?
Tara, dysfunction is always the safe bet on Congress, right? If you can choose, oh, will they work together and pass a big infrastructure bill, or will there be gridlock? Gridlock is always where you want to put your money. But, traditionally, the reason that legislation was bipartisan was because both sides would see some advantage in getting some of what they wanted, even though they couldn't get everything they wanted. The other thing is Republicans could say, this is for the good of the country, and therefore we're going to do it. I know that sounds very Pollyannish and out of date, and maybe it is, but I can tell you that it's kind of the attitude that Joe Biden takes. Joe Biden wants to give this a chance. The issue for some in the White House is, how long do you give it before you say, enough's enough, they're not going to come around, we're going to do it the other way?
Rick, do you have a question, or should we bring in the caller?
Let's bring in the first caller, then I'll hit another question after we do that.
Okay, fabulous.
Oh,
Welcome, welcome. Jed from
so my,
Pennsylvania, yes.
yes. So my question is this. When a party is defeated substantially in an election, I'm used, as somebody who enjoys just looking at the political history of America, I'm used to seeing a change in course. Like in 1964, when Barry Goldwater went way out there, um, by the time of 1968, Richard Nixon came back with a critically different strategy. He had some of those elements, but it was pretty different. And then later in the 80s, when President Carter was ousted, the Democratic Party went and it reformed itself. So now, in what I think is the most decisive election of the 2000s, why is the Republican Party doubling down on a strategy which has diminishing returns with every single second?
Oh, Jed,
Yeah,
if
I
we had
mean,
the answer to
yeah,
that. Go ahead, Susan.
you know, you're right, because we're seeing something happen here that we have never seen happen in modern times, which is a defeated president continues to have a hold on his party. That, as you say, that didn't happen with Jimmy Carter. It didn't happen with George H.W. Bush. You know, even with presidents that get to leave on their own terms after serving 2 terms in the White House, like a George W. Bush, he did not have continued hold on his party. But we did a poll in a USA Today Suffolk poll 2 weeks ago in January, and we had done a poll in December, so we had a very close comparison about before and after the January 6th assault on the Capitol. In the December poll, 92% of Republicans approved of the job that President Trump was doing. 92%, that's extraordinary support. So in the second poll, which was after the assault on the Capitol, we asked the same question: do you approve of the job Donald Trump is doing? It fell all the way to 90% of Republicans.
Oh my
In other
gosh.
words, it didn't fall at all. No meaningful change, even though this was in the wake of this terrible, horrific, historic attack on the Capitol. And that just says to you that what Trump said today in his own press release, his announcement of after his meeting with Kevin McCarthy, he sent out a statement saying no one is a better and more important endorsement than Donald Trump. At the moment, if you're talking about Republican primaries, that is probably true.
That's why Kevin McCarthy was there. And it's all about that political expediency as opposed to doing what's right for the country. Because continuing to embolden those people and embolden what Trumpism represents is dangerous to our democracy. We just pulled back from life support as it was in the 4 years with him. And yet they want to continue to inject this poison into our zeitgeist every day when they could stop it if they just put their foot down and said enough. And to your point about presidents, and new presidents changing tone. I mean, Ford wouldn't even say Nixon's name for goodness sakes after Watergate when he came on, and he was asked, "Well, will you say his name?" And he said, "I just can't bring myself to do it." Right, because it was clouded in such shame and dishonor that they didn't even want to utter Nixon's name after what he did with Watergate. And Trump was 100 times worse in his transgressions. Rick, go ahead, and then we'll take a tweet while we still have Susan.
So one thing I want to ask you about is, have you detected a change in the tone or the vibe on the media front? Obviously, they're not at war with the press every day, but we're already seeing some of the usual sort of traditional pushback from the Biden folks on press coverage in the New York Times and elsewhere. What do you think the state of the press is going to look like in the next 4 years under a Biden administration?
Well, I think it will look normal. It's like normal in that we'll have briefings 5 days a week in which questions will be asked and either answered or dodged. And there'll be reporters who complain that the questions are being dodged and they'll be right. And you'll see the White House get mad about editorials like they did about the New York Times editorial today. But there won't be efforts to threaten the safety of reporters as there has been at Trump rallies for the past 5 years. And the administration, I suspect, no matter how mad they get at anybody's editorial, they will not refer to the press as the enemy of the people. We don't need a friendly relationship. We need to have an adversarial relationship, but we don't need to have a relationship in which one side seems to be calling for the termination of the other.
and courteous, but not obsequious or threatened. What
Yes, I mean,
both ends are bad.
right. You want the press is supposed to be adversarial, and it will be, and the press will try to hold the Biden administration to account. For instance, on their promises on COVID, 100 million shots in 100 days. Now that's been raised some. Does President Biden deliver on what he has promised to do on COVID? That is a question on which I think his presidency will hinge.
It must be
Yeah.
nice not to be called the enemy of the people every day and lied to, at Baghdad Bob levels from the podium in the in the briefing room on a daily basis. It's quite refreshing. I have to be honest, watching it, even not being there. I can imagine what it's like even being there. All right, we'll take a tweet and then we're going to let lovely Susan Page go. What's the tweet? All right. What are your thoughts regarding the January 5th meeting at the Trump Hotel in Washington, D.C.? Given the timing, it looks suspiciously like a planning meeting in anticipation of the events on the 6th. So for those who don't know what that's about, so there's been some reports that we know that Senator Tommy Tuberville was at the Trump Hotel allegedly on the 5th before the insurrection. What he was doing there, we don't know. And he denied that he was actually there. And then photographs showed that he was there. So it's a bit of a pickle. And then there's other reports that there may have been other senators or members of Congress who were congregating there on the 5th. And were they plotting or not? We don't know. I mean, I think with each day going by, there are a lot of intrepid reporters who are trying to track this down. And given how idiotic and proud of themselves so many of these Trump supporters and insurrectionists were, they have posted a lot of their activities on social media. So I'm sure that we will find something. Susan, have you heard anything about this issue in any of your reporting or come across anything about this January 5th meeting at the Trump Hotel?
I agree with you. There's so much we don't know yet, but we will find out. And it will be not only with the work of the press, but with these FBI investigations going on. Thank goodness for social media, because what a tool that has been to identify people who were pushing their way, smashing their way, and marauding through the Capitol. I don't have any additional information to add on that January 5th meeting, but I do think we will be exploring this, investigating this, seeing prosecutions for this for months and months and maybe years.
Well, Susan Page, thank you so much for joining us and for your many years of fabulous reporting and the great job that you did moderating the vice presidential debate this time around. It was unconventional. Everything about this election campaign was unconventional, and you did a fantastic job. Be sure to follow Susan.
Thank you so much.
Get her book when it comes out in April, and read her stuff in USA Today. Thanks, Susan.
Hey, thank you.
She's such a gem. I love Susan Page.
She knows her business.
She does.
That's something that people, that there's a certain thing about people who've hung through the Washington process for a few times, a few cycles here and there, where they get to know what it really means under the surface. And she's absolutely one of those people.
Yeah, she's
and of course, so is our next guest.
Indeed, he is. But before we get to our next guest, we're going to treat our Lincoln Project audience to one of the latest Lincoln Project ads. As we've been railing against the seditionists, let's put a little highlight on one of our favorite coup senators.
We think of history as something that's in the past and forget that we are making it.
Josh Hawley.
Oh, Josh.
You had it all. You were on track for a bright career.
So much potential.
A leader in American politics.
Building a legacy.
You went to the right schools.
Stanford, Yale.
You built your connections.
On your way up.
Won your seat.
A winner.
It had all come together.
You didn't learn a thing.
But then,
sedition.
You made a choice.
The wrong choice.
A choice to stand against America.
Traitors.
You stood with insurgency instead of democracy.
What a waste.
You pledged your allegiance to Donald Trump.
You're his guy.
And all that came with him.
White supremacists.
These are your followers now.
Losers.
These are your allies.
You're a disgrace.
You made your choice.
What were you thinking?
The wrong choice.
What will you do now?
You can't distance yourself from it.
You can't escape
You led it.
Following you.
This
Your fault.
is your coup.
Your failure.
Oh, that Josh Hawley. He does not want this Lincoln Project smoke.
I'm on the air, Tara. I was going through some of the new ads that our production team is pumping out. And that ad is going to feel a little like a love tap to Josh Hawley when the next ones start to hit him, because we're not done with you, Josh. Not by a long
Oh,
stretch of road.
I mean, if you're over him whining already, I think he might shed a tear or two by the time we're done with him. The whiniest wuss of the
You know,
Senate. My
he is
God.
he is he is complaining every day. Oh, I'm being
Yeah.
muzzled. I can't speak out. Oh, I'm only on Fox and New York Post and blah blah blah. Anyway,
Between
moving
him and
on.
Matt Gaetz, I don't know who's worse. I mean, they are the biggest whiny wusses I've ever seen in my life. Oh, for God's sake, shut up. Grow a pair and shut up. Stop it. I just can't with them. They are
The
just
fact that he tried to
an
step to me
embarrassment.
on Fox about our Twitter followers.
Twitter followers.
What? What?
God. Oh, yeah. That's the world we live in today, I tell you. Let's bring in our next guest, Norm Ornstein. He's an emeritus scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, where he has been studying politics, elections, and the U.S. Congress for the U.S. Congress for more than 44 decades. He's a contributing editor for The Atlantic, and his most recent book is One Nation After Trump, a guide for the perplexed, the disillusioned, the desperate, and the not yet deported. Norm, welcome to The Breakdown.
It's great to be with you. Love you guys.
Thank you so much. We're glad
Appreciate
to
that.
have you. And
The feeling
I
is
love,
mutual.
yes, I love AEI. I am part of the leadership network over there, and AEI does such
Okay.
amazing work. And for years, I followed AEI's work before becoming part of that, when Arthur Brooks was the head of AEI, who is my conservative hero modern day. So you guys do great work over there. And tonight we are going to break down some stuff about impeachment and what's going on, and take a look at that. So we're going to play our impeachment recap, and then I'll get your reaction on the other side.
Okay.
Leading up to the riot last Wednesday, McConnell also blames the president's comments and actions for losing the Republican majority in the Senate.
Mitch McConnell could vote in favor of conviction.
Yes. Makes it a heck of a lot easier, Wolf, to get 17 Republicans if one of them is named Mitch McConnell.
Speaker Nancy Pelosi is expected to send over that single article of impeachment for inciting the insurrection at the Capitol.
And the big question is going to be, what are Republicans going to do?
Incitement to insurrection is an impeachable offense. If not, what is?
We already have a flaming fire in this country, and it's like taking a bunch of gasoline and pouring it on top of the fire.
Notably, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has not indicated how he will vote yet.
Just last week, Republican leader Mitch McConnell condemned Trump's words to the mob that stormed the Capitol.
The mob was fed lies. They were provoked by the president.
All 100 senators were sworn in as jurors yesterday, and then one Republican tried to stop it.
Democrats are wasting the nation's time on a partisan vendetta against a man no longer in office.
Mr. McConnell.
But today, McConnell, too, voted that the impeachment trial should not proceed. Only 5 Republican senators voted to move forward.
It is extraordinarily unlikely that the president will be convicted. Just do the math.
Oh my gosh, Norm, we live in such strange times. You look at that and you just go, what is happening and how do we move forward? I mean, Biden is being hit with a trifecta of crises. And with all of that going on, now we have an impeachment trial pending. What's the best way for Biden to navigate this?
There's some reports that suggest that the White House would have preferred not to go forward with this. I disagree. I think if you don't hold this monster accountable, that the consequences down the road will be that much worse. And you can see, and you have seen what's happened here. McConnell clearly has contempt for Trump, but he is a leader when it comes to obstruction of the Biden administration's agenda. of the nominees that will come forward, but it was pretty clear that his own conference wasn't going to follow him on this one. And when I hear, John Cornyn say, we shouldn't be doing any of this, it's time to put it past us. And of course, the execrable Nikki Haley saying, leave the guy alone. After he incited violence that has 6 people dead, 140 police injured, one will probably lose an eye, others with brain injuries, that you would let this go tells you more about the state of today's Republican Party. And it seems to me that even if we stopped this and moved for a censure resolution, as a couple of Democrats and Republicans appear likely to try to push, or even just a separate vote on the 14th Amendment, Section 3, to bar him from running for office again. If we don't go through a process where Americans pay attention and learn more about what he did, who was involved, and all of the mayhem that happened, then we're missing something very important. Now, I do think it's important for Biden and for Schumer and for the rest of Congress to keep this focused on a half day a day, to do a lot of interviews and depositions of witnesses. Lindsey Graham said, well, if they're going to have witnesses, we'll have witnesses. Right. This will go on for months. Fine, Lindsey, you bring your witnesses. I want days of Rudy Giuliani testifying about what he did.
Oh, yes.
I want to see the hair dye coming down
hair dye.
as
That's
he's
right.
talking. And we'll have our witnesses too. And those witnesses are going to include the members of Congress, not just Tommy Tuberville, but Paul Gosar and Mo Brooks and the others who very likely conspired here. Get their emails and their texts that were going on the 5th and the 6th. See if they were communicating with Trump. So this is very important. Now, if it fails after we've got all this evidence, and you have all these Republicans who are going to be known in history for twice letting a miscreant off the hook in ways that were directly damaging to our future as a country and our political system, then so be it. And if after that you want to bring up the 14th Amendment and bar him from running again, I'm fine with that. But this has to go forward.
Let me just ask you a question.
I agree with you more, Norm.
Before you come in, Rick, about the 14th Amendment, just to clear this up, because a lot of people were unaware that this was, this 14th Amendment, Section 3, barring him from office was an option. They're like, oh, okay, well, why can't we just do that? Do they need to vote to convict him in the impeachment trial in order to trigger that amendment? Or can they vote for that regardless of whether he's convicted or not?
They can vote for that regardless. And, it's so funny. If you watch McConnell, who after Trump was impeached, said, well, we can't deal with this until after the 20th. And then after the 20th, agreed that it was unconstitutional to deal with it after the 20th. You can't say that the 14th Amendment is unconstitutional. Right. It's in the goddamn Constitution. And it says right there that if you participate in a seditious act, you will be barred from running for office. It's right there. Not even Neil Gorsuch or Amy Coney Barrett or Sam Alito can say this is unconstitutional. They try, but they can't.
And would it be a simple majority, or does it require a supermajority?
In this case, a simple majority. Yeah.
So, okay, good.
Again, I don't want to just do that because he'll rewrite history and he'll have all of his minions rewriting history. We want the official record to show what he said, what he did, who he talked to. And of course, while this is one article of impeachment about the incitement to insurrection, you have the context of this, the phone call to Brad Raffensperger trying to manipulate the election, all of the other actions that he took. Now we know, trying to manipulate the Justice Department. I want to know what went down with the Department of Defense when he got rid of all the top officials to bring in his henchmen, and then they barred the National Guard from coming even as the Capitol was being invaded. So
and now we know that a commander
don't know, and this is the way to learn it.
Right. And we now know that the commander of the DC National Guard was stripped of his normal authority to be able to deploy his troops when there's a threat to life or property. and there was no explanation as to why that was done. That is unconventional. It had never been done before, and it just furthers this idea that Trump. It was clear that the memo was out to not do anything about it. If that's not impeachable in and of itself, I don't know what is. He sat back and watched a deadly insurrection take place on in our capital. It's mind-boggling to me. Go ahead, Rick.
We look in this country at presidential scandals, presidential malfeasance in the last 50 years. And there are two things that really stand out in the minds of most people. Watergate is the big kahuna. Watergate is the thing we looked at as this enormous challenge to our constitutional order, to the powers of the president, to how this country would be governed and led. And when Watergate is seen through the mirror of this, I want your opinion on this because you have a lot of historical depth on these things. This is going to come out, if we get a real investigation, I think is something vastly more consequential. It was a shorter term conspiracy, but it was a conspiracy to commit sedition and to seize power, and to seize power that day and to disenfranchise millions of African American voters and to hold power illegally for Donald Trump. I mean, it seems to me that it's going to make Watergate look like a nothing burger in comparison.
So if we use analogies, I would say, and I have to say, I've actually been in Washington for 50 years. I was here when Archibald Cox was fired. We really were concerned that we might not survive. But let's equate that to breaking and entering. This is vicious assault, rape, and murder. That's the comparison that we have here. What Nixon did was terrible. What Trump has done is so much worse, and the people around Trump as well. And while we had an attorney general back then, who Attorney General Mitchell was at the time, no question, the worst attorney general ever. There were some plenty bad ones. Bill Barr greatly outstrips him on that front as well. There are just so many offenses here, and we haven't gotten anywhere near the bottom of it, and that so many Republicans continue to support him, and that the Republicans in the Senate, the House, is almost a lost cause. Although, watching Matt Gaetz go out to Wyoming today and seeing, they're going after Liz Cheney, not because she's insufficiently conservative. She is as conservative as any of them. This is a cult trying to destroy what they view as an apostate. An apostate who stood up for the Constitution because the cult leader was under siege because he had done horrible things. And you think of the cult leaders that we know of, those who murdered their own in Guyana with Jones, or the ones who rape their children and put women into bondage. It's the same sort of thing. It's a cult people who do what they know is wrong because that's what you do in a cult, or you'll be excommunicated. It's just outrageous.
I'm glad you've said it. I've been saying that this is a cult for years, and many know of my epic argument with Meghan McCain on The View back in the summer of 2018, where I said that this is a cult. And she took quite offense to that. And I said, too bad, because of the reasons you just named, the way people were behaving. When Donald Trump says he can shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and he won't lose any supporters, we all went, this guy's out of his mind. He was right. The scary part about this is that he recognized that he had this power that early on, which makes it even that much scarier to know that he was that conniving, to recognize he had the ability to manipulate people like this. But it's more than just a cult now, Norm. It's a death cult, because of look what happened with the behavior toward COVID and the way these people are behaving and rationalizing the insurrection on the 6th that killed people. It is. Do you think there's going to be another party? Do you think that Donald Trump is really going to peel off and try and do this third party thing? Because it's kind of tough to do. It sounds good in theory, but tough to pull off.
So before I get to that, one question I have to ask you. With the Arizona Republican Party condemning Cindy McCain, has Meghan called you and said, you may have a point there? No?
If only. No. And I'm not going to hold my breath expecting to get that phone call either.
Okay. anyhow, I think Trump's, sort of comic attempt to create a third party by having this petition filed that's completely ridiculous on legal grounds is much more a threat to the Republicans that if you don't bow down to me and continue to, I will destroy you. Because forming a third party would divide Republican votes and cost them the House and Senate or their chances of winning it the next time. He's not going to do it. He's going to try and keep himself alive because he wants to make money. And he will be out there and he'll raise as much money as he can through some political devices, whether it is declaring his candidacy for the Republican nomination in 2024 or creating some sham third party. It's all to pull in all that money that he'll use for his own personal purposes. But there's not going to be a third party. If we get a third party, what I'd like to see is the Lincoln Party become the second party and the existing Republican Party become the one trailing behind with the same level of support as the Green Party.
Wouldn't that be interesting? I
But
have
we're
no
a long
comment
ways
about
away
that.
from that. You know,
Yeah,
I actually
yeah.
think, you've got your focus on 2024. I've got my focus on 2022. I believe in the rule of three.
We do
You
too.
lose one election and you can say, we just picked a terrible candidate. You lose two and you say, we did it again. By the third time, you start to realize it's something more than that. And then there's traction for you guys to try and create a problem-solving party. But without that, they're moving further and further into batshit crazy land, and we know that, and you know it. I want to
Yes.
add
Norm,
one thing before we get to the next. Listening to Susan Page, and Susan and her husband Carl Lubsdorff are very old friends, and they're just wonderful journalists. But I don't want to stop this with, we're going to be back to business as usual. Business as usual was not good enough. And the Times editorial today that made the Biden administration mad made me just as bad, because that's business as usual. They said Biden shouldn't do executive agreements. He's got to work with Congress. In that editorial, there wasn't one mention of Mitch McConnell, not one mention of blocking the organizing of the Senate so that he could hold on to the filibuster that he will use the same as he did with Obama for 8 years to try and block everything that he can, delegitimize. And the press corps treats it as, well, they're both the same. Everybody does this. And the far left is the same as the far right. And there is a far left. It is a trace element at this point of the governing nature of the Democratic Party, much less the party apparatus in the different states. The nutcases are running most of the state parties, and they're everybody except one or maybe two members of the House, and at least 85 to 90% of the Republicans in the Senate. And if you don't call it what it is, if you don't say straight out when behavior is not just, here's their strategy, but it's an attempt to blow up the governing process so that they can succeed, then you're not doing your job as a press corps.
That's
one of the
a great
things.
criticism.
This is one of the things I've been talking about. I'm writing a little bit about it right now. Is the folkways and culture of Washington media have always had a lot of whataboutism, a lot of both sidesism built into it. Oh, both sides are bad. Both sides are doing the wrong thing. And there have been times when both sides do the wrong thing.
Yeah.
But right now we're in a position where they should have a hard wake-up call that Mitch McConnell's goal is nothing, absolutely nothing to do with progress for this country. It is to train wreck the Biden administration right now as fast as he can so that 2022's map, which is a little rougher for him than he'd like, improves and improves quickly. So I think this is something, I think you're exactly right. I read the Times piece. I was just like, this is not the same equivalence. Trump was making those executive orders because he was completely unwilling to even try to legislate. Joe Biden has already proven that he's willing to try to legislate. He's willing to try to go out and accomplish things in that sphere, which he's comfortable in. But Mitch McConnell is never going to let a damn thing go if he can help it. He will have to be beaten down hard over things like COVID relief before he realizes that he has to cooperate, and he may get away with it. He may actually get away with it because he's got people like Tim Kaine and saying, "Oh, impeachment! Oh, why would we do that? So if we can only get 55, why would we even bother?" And Joe Manchin and others who are also, I think, in some ways victim of that thing. And the Republicans, as you probably know, as you do know, are great at playing the refs.
Yeah, we have a mainstream press corps. There are exceptions, but we have a mainstream press corps that is absolutely paranoid about being labeled as having a liberal bias. And so they bend over triply backwards to show that they don't. But along the way, they don't report the news anymore. And they've been inculcated with this idea that their job is to report both sides of the story, even when there aren't two sides. And that is simply failing in the job. You're supposed to report the truth. And because they've had that attitude for so long, and it's a particular problem on most of the Sunday talk shows, Jake Tapper's is an exception to that, with the kinds of panels they bring on and the questions they ask. And a part of it, you're right, Rick, they're Washington denizens. They don't want to lose sources. We saw the way all of Trump's press secretaries were handled with kid gloves compared to what they did, because behind the scenes, Sarah Huckabee Sanders would give them little tidbits, and Kellyanne Conway would leak stuff to them, and they didn't want to lose those sources. And this has to be a wake-up call. This is an existential moment for the future of the country. And if January 6th doesn't prove it, and if today, with Kevin McCarthy, who is the worst House leader in the entire history of the country, can go down and pal around with the guy who tried to destroy American democracy and get his own vice president killed, if that isn't a wake-up call, what is?
Exactly.
I mean, these guys were bunkered in their offices by a mob that would have killed any one of them. They would have killed any one. They would not have gone and picked out the Democrats. They would have said, "Oh, that's a member of the Congress. That's a member of the Senate." Because 99% of these MAGAs who were attacking the Capitol had no clue who anybody is. They might have saved a famous one, but they would have killed. I mean, if you were a Steve Daines, let's say, that none of these guys would recognize, they could have easily just beaten him to death if they found him.
Sure, and would have, and
would have.
I've talked to enough members who were there who genuinely feared for their lives when this was going on. And then they turn right around, and 2/3 of House Republicans after this vote that the election was rigged. I mean, if that doesn't tell you
dissonance is a hell of a drug
to this party turned cult, I don't know what would.
We
I'm channeling my inner Rick Wilson.
Be careful.
Yes.
It leads to chaos.
One is enough. We're going to take a call, if you don't mind, Norm. We have a caller from Hawaii.
Oh, hi.
Welcome.
Hello. Hi. So nice to see you, everybody. And thank you so much for doing it. It kept my sanity going on since, I don't know, the summer or before. My name is Dina. I'm from Hawaii. I'm a social studies teacher. How about that? And I'm also an immigrant from Russia on top of everything else. So I have this whole bunch of issues to deal with. So my main question is that, first of all, with Norm, I agree with you that there needs to be another party. This is not working for anybody. And as a teacher, a social studies teacher, I am very concerned about my students right now for many different reasons. First of all, we are all online. And so everything has to be taught online. And they're struggling. The issue of distinguishing fake news from real news became a problem. Because they have all the multiple streams of information coming their way. They're spending all their time online now. And whenever we talk about civics or political issues, there's always a problem for the educators to find resources to address this. So as a Lincoln Project, are you guys planning on coming up with something for us, the teachers, to easily to go to say, here's how we do it. You know, this is the fake, this is the real. Because we have propaganda, right? We do have resources, but it's not enough anymore. It is not enough.
Thank you for calling. Thank you so much for calling us, Tina. I think you're our first caller from Hawaii. And I just want to say that what you've identified is a key part of something we've understood now since the election. We understood that defeating Donald Trump was a political problem to solve, and we helped to solve it. The political problem of Donald Trump is not the same as the problem of Trumpism. And we think Trumpism is now not just a political problem, it's a civics problem. It's a social problem. It's a moral problem. And so we're going to have to, it's a cultural problem almost more than anything else. So we're going to have to start working to solve that. And that in part means getting at people, not just in the political space, but talking to them on platforms like LPTV, on platforms like our podcast, like and subscribe, on platforms that are going to be emerging from some of the work the Lincoln Project's been doing. Because we really feel that unless we start reaching people in a broad spectrum and talking about the values that should underpin this country, and talking about the real issues, and talking about, you know, the way that people have been deceived by misinformation and deceived by a sense of complacency about the strength of our republic and our democracy, you know, then we're going to be at risk. So we think we can help build up the immune system of democracy with the Lincoln Project and other projects we're doing. So, but thank you again so much for your call.
Okay, let me add a couple of things here. One is, if there is a tech billionaire listening, we need to have a module that can be used in classes on how to find real information and sort it out from fake information. And I understand, you know, kids are adept now at using social media, but sorting out within that what's real and what isn't, which is going to become harder and harder, in part because of foreign actors who now can easily manipulate, because of the ease with which you can manipulate video. We need to have people taught ways in which they can be more sophisticated about it. They shouldn't be doing it on their own. And developing something like that and getting it out to social studies teachers around the country would be an enormous public asset. The second thing I would say is I'm very much involved in debate, urban debate. We, through my family, sponsor a summer institute for public school kids in the Washington, D.C. area. We have 200 kids a year from rising sixth graders through high school. They learn debate. They learn how to get information, how to do research. They have to take all different sides. But in the process of doing that, they sort out what's real from what isn't. And they learn how to argue and how to make a case, how to stand up in front of people, life skills. And bringing debate to these classes, doing debate-centered education, is a way, even if they're remote, of getting them more engaged, but also teaching them a little bit about how to sort these things out.
That's right. It teaches critical thinking.
Fantastic.
Which is supply. That is absolutely wonderful. And particularly in those urban communities, a lot of times those kids are not taught to speak out and be opinionated at home. So to give them that outlet to be able to express themselves and be inquisitive and ask questions and be assertive is, I'm telling you, Norm, is a life-changing skill that those kids will take with them, and that will help them get out of some of those circumstances that they may have been condemned to before. So I applaud you for that. That is wonderful. More people should.
Well, I can tell you that, you know, we did this because we lost a son 6 years ago, and he was a national champion high school debater. And we give out an award every year for the kid at the camp, and then they go on and they do tournaments, and they have you know, programs in their schools. We give out an award for the kid who best exemplifies the values of my son Matthew. the winner of the award 2 years ago won the National Urban Debater of the League of the Year award, is now in his second year at Harvard. We have kids at the best schools in the country because universities understand that these are skills that mean that they're very well prepared. And we have 85% Title I kids, and they're just amazing. You get these kids in sixth grade that have never spoken in front of anybody just because, as you say, the parents don't ask for their opinions. 3 days in, and they're up there, and boy, you wouldn't want to debate them. They're that good.
Yep. That's
Norm,
amazing.
that is a really, really great effort. That is amazing. That is amazing.
Well, I wonder if your student was part of the Institute of Politics at Harvard. I may have crossed paths with him last year when I was a fellow there. There are so many amazing.
Look him up. His name is Jonathan Collins.
Okay.
And this is an African American kid from a suburb of Prince George's County, working class family. Smart as could be. He's going to be a scientist. But debate gave him the tools that allowed him to fulfill his potential. And that's what, if we believe in a society that is about equal opportunity, you can't have some kids who start 25 yards ahead of the starting line and others who start 25 yards behind. You bring these kids up to the starting line and boy, they're just going to shine, and they are.
Frederick Douglass said, education is the key to freedom. And he was right. Norm Ornstein, we have good for him. I'll look for him. We have one last caller.
I meant Frederick
and then
Douglass.
We're going to let you go. Oh, well, him too. I think Donald Trump talked to him a couple years ago.
That's
Go get that
yes,
Frederick Douglass,
exactly.
right? We're going to take
Offered
one last
him a discount
caller
at Mar-a-Lago, I think.
Yeah, good grief. We have Karen.
Hello.
Yes. Hi, Karen.
Yes. Hello. Hi, Rick. Rick, I'm a stalker. I love you. I follow you everywhere. I look all over YouTube to see what Rick is talking about. I absolutely adore you. I adore everybody on the Lincoln Project. Quick question.
Thank you.
Tara.
Yes.
You are so skillful at speaking to conservatives. You do it without effort, okay? I want to know, how do you keep that sister girl from coming out and clocking some of these people? Because I can't do it. I cannot take what they're saying. That it's like they live in an alternate universe, but you have a special skill where you never break that cross that line. How do you do that?
Oh, well, Karen, thank you. That's very kind of you. It's funny that you say that, because I say that it's the Jersey girl in me that you will see come out every now and then. And, when you come from a family like mine, where my mom and I and my stepdad, we had something called argubating in our family. It was kind of an argument and a debate, but it was never hostile. It was very spirited. So I kind of grew up in an environment where we used to argubate all the time. And when you're from Jersey, everybody's got an opinion. And so it's just kind of a natural way that you handle yourself. I have Italian blood in me on top of that, so I talk with my hands. Passion is just something that's in my DNA. So when you're in an environment like I am, you have to just stay focused on what the purpose is of your appearance that day. And I always approach those arguments, even with the most wretched Trump folks that I had to deal with for the 5 years that I was with CNN. I always had to stay. What kept me centered was knowing that there were people like Karen who were watching and depended on my trusted voice of reason. And that responsibility I take very seriously. So when I feel that rise come in me and I want to tell someone to go fuck off, I bring it back and I say, that is not what we're going to do today, because that is not the goal. The goal is to inform, be a voice of reason, and hopefully inspire other people to go ahead and seek the truth and speak up for themselves too, to feel empowered that they too are not crazy and that they can speak up and defend what they believe in. So that's how I stay centered. No, it's a great call. That's funny. Sister girl. It's the Jersey girl you got to
For
worry about.
calling.
Trust me. Thank you so much, Karen. And on that note, Norm Ornstein, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. You're welcome back here anytime. Be sure to follow Norm on Twitter, read his books, read the work at AEI. They have fantastic scholars there. And if you take donations for your program, Norm, tweet it out and let our folks know, because I know there are people who are watching that would love to support what you're doing.
I will. And if you go to mornstein.org, you'll see the foundation and all the work that we do, including in the
LPTV feed, guys.
Make sure
We'll
definitely promote that.
Thank you, Norm.
Thank you so much, Norm.
Thank you. Talk to you all soon.
All right, guys. Well, it has been a week. We have survived almost the first full week of the Biden administration with no drama. No one has tweeted anything crazy. There's been no press secretaries hiding in the bushes from the press. It has been wonderful. But you know who hasn't had a wonderful week? Elise Stefanik. She is who Abe is watching this week. Elise Stefanik is a representative who we thought, yes, Abe is watching. We were watching you, Elise. She was someone that we thought had great potential. She was elected in 2014. She was smart. She went to Harvard. She was part of the bipartisan, problem solvers that were going to get things done. This new, fresh breed of Republicans. No, she has decided to make the deal with the devil and become a full-on Trumper. And I remember last year watching her during the impeachment trial and thinking to myself, what the hell happened to Elise Stefanik? Well, when I went to Harvard last year, exactly a year ago this week, actually, when I moved up there, and Rick came and spoke to one of my classes. It was fun. We had a good time. Elise Stefanik was on the IOP, the Institute of Politics at the Kennedy Center, at the Kennedy School. She's on the advisory board there. And I remember some of my students and some folks over at the Kennedy School saying, like, what's going on with Elise Stefanik? They were very disappointed in the turn she decided to take in her career. Well, we have seen that she's decided to continue to behave this way and go full Trump. And she was one of the people who voted to deny the certification of Joe Biden's election and did not vote for Trump's impeachment. So the Lincoln Project, we are watching you, Elise Stefanik. Abe is watching. Take a look.
What happened to Elise Stefanik? She was supposed to be different, better than the rest. Small town roots, big time education. Worked with President Bush. Was committed to compassionate conservatism. A different kind of Republican. Youngest woman elected to Congress. Such a bright future. Now, she's just another sad Trump apologist. When Trump demeans and attacks women, she goes along, smiling. When Trump encourages racists, she is silent. What happened? Did she need Trump's approval that bad? Did she want to be one of the gang? It's sad. Now the US Capitol is attacked, her own office, and she still supports Trump. If Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert went to Harvard, they'd be Elise Stefanik. What a waste.
Oh, Elise, what a difference a year.
Such a disappointment.
Harvard also kicked her off that advisory board at the Institute of Politics after students, some of my students there, I'm so proud of them, and law students got together. They pressured the administration there at Harvard, and they said, she's got to go. She took a stand against democracy, and that does not represent the values of the Institute of Politics. And the administration agreed, and she's out of there. So I hope it's worth it for her. Instead of being humble or saying, well, you know what, maybe I shouldn't have taken the position against democracy, she tripled down on it and said it was liberal cancel culture, and she's now disavowing Harvard and wearing it as a badge of valor. Listen, if you don't like what Stefanik,
I'm sure she'll prosper at the Trump University Institute of Politics.
Yeah, that's right. She can go to that advisory board. And you can let her know that you're not happy with her. Reach out to her, tweet her, use Abe is watching when you let her know how you feel about how she has chosen to go down her career path. That's it for our breakdown this week. We will see you guys next week, Tuesday, 9 p.m. We'll be back. Please stay safe, double mask if you have to, and pay attention. We'll see you next week.
Hey guys, hope you're doing well. Just watching my algorithms get crushed. I guess I did something to piss off the Instagram gods, so hopefully you're seeing this stuff anyway. We'll do what we can. Talk to you soon.